Hello, hello, hello. Welcome everybody to the Build and Grow with Real Estate Show. My name is Judah Hoover, and this guy right here, joining us just in the nick of time, is
Going
Josh
on?
Weidman. Josh is a hard money banker, and I am a real estate investor and an executive in a realty company. So I can list properties for you and find out great properties to buy, and Josh can do the money side of it for you. But really, we both bring a wealth of knowledge to the real estate space because we've both been investing on a personal level as well as a professional level for about 20 years. And that's what we talk about here today: how to make money as a realtor, how to make money as a lender, how to make money as a real estate investor. You know, Josh, one of the local brokers here in my area just sent out an email to a bunch of local agents what to do your first year in real estate.
Yep.
And guess what? It's going to be Monday night or something like that, and I'm signing up because you never know what you could learn. You know, I am 20 years removed from my first year in real estate, but
Yep.
I still think there might be a thing or two to learn. And it's a Zoom call, and I'm sure they're going to be, also telling me how great it would be to move my license over to them, whatever else. But I'm
No.
always looking to learn, and I always think that there is relevant current knowledge. You know, I love books. The problem with books is once they're published, they're done, unless they publish an updated version. So the point of this show is to bring timely and relevant information to what's going on in the real estate world. And to that end, we've got some timely, relevant information.
Yeah,
There,
absolutely.
there was a Facebook discussion that kind of blew up this morning, and I know some people were talking about it yesterday and the day before. Because there is some leasehold land in Middletown, a small borough here in central Pennsylvania,
Yep.
and they sent out a bunch of invoices, and it's got some people up in arms who have recently bought property in the area, and they're like, "Wait, I don't own the land. Wait, is this a scam?" And what's funny is one guy was like, "Oh yeah, I mail a bunch of those things out every year, and just kind of to see who pays." So I mean, jokingly, obviously being
Well,
fraudulent, but
this
tell
is
us
a
about a joke.
this is a pretty common thing in a lot of different areas. Baltimore, it's a really big deal. I mean, it doesn't cost a lot, but
Right,
look, if you have 100,000 houses and you're sending out a $8 or $10 invoice to 100,000 people a year, it's not chump change. I mean
right,
that's real money.
right.
Um,
So when Middletown was developed, the Fry family owned a whole lot of land in the area, and instead of selling properties, they did long-term land leases for
yeah,
people, and it became locally, regionally acceptable. And what that means is that they then were able to just hold on to the land. They took the money and funded an orphanage, then became three orphanages, and now they have since closed the orphanages, but they do a lot in the area for local youths in the Middletown area is who they serve. And I looked up this morning just because I was curious, how much land they have. You know, Hershey Trust owns some land there in the Hershey area as well.
yeah.
And so I was like, hey, how much, do they have here? And you can find their 990 filings. So Josh, you or I, when we file our taxes, the IRS form, your official personal tax return is a 1040, right? A
Okay.
corporation uses a what's the one that's like 1065 is one, and also 1120s. I forget which corporation uses which one at which time, but anyway, 1120 is the most common corporate returns, and they look a little bit different, but they're still an IRS form. And 990 is for a church or organization that is tax exempt, but the IRS says, hey, listen, you don't have to claim any of this income, but you got to tell me how much money you're getting every month or every year. So if you make more than like $25,000, and also if you keep, I forget what the threshold is, but I think it's like if you ever keep more than $25,000 cash just in the bank, you have to report as well as an entity. Because if Josh Weidman Incorporated was a 501c3 charitable organization, and you built houses for people, you know what I mean, and just gave it away. If you raised $1 million, but you only spent 800,000, that would be reasonable to keep that other $200,000 in the bank for reserves or whatever, So if a corporation, if a charity ever keeps more than $25,000, they have to do this. Anyway, you can look this up. And what I found is this charity gets between $100,000 and $500,000 a year. Now that sounds like,
is this a charitable trust?
It is. It's a charitable trust. It's a registered 501c3.
All right. So yeah, go ahead.
No, that doesn't mean that, the president of United Way makes really good money. You know what I mean? Like,
that's what I was going to say. Is a lot of these, there are a lot of ways, there are a lot of parts of the tax code that where a charity has a bunch of the, you get a rich guy with a bunch of money and he's about to die. He puts all his money in a charitable trust, and then all of his kids and grandkids end up working there, making really great salaries, and they just happen to break even every year.
Well, yeah. And so let's say Josh, that I owned a grocery store, right? And I set up a charity to buy foods that I could send to Africa. And the grocery and the charity makes no money. The charity breaks even, but the charity brings in all these donations, and guess who they buy all their groceries from? So there's a bunch of different ways. And listen, I'm a very charitable person. I love, I give to my church, I give to charity and everything like that. But you certainly need to watch what's going on. And I'm not looking to make a judgment on what's going on with Fry Trust there in Middletown right now. I just want people to understand what's going on. Yep. So they earn about $25,000 to $50,000 a year in dividend income. Yep. They make between $100,000 and $200,000 a year in selling real estate. Because here's what you can do. A lot of people don't know this. You can approach the trust and say, hey, listen, instead of me paying you $10 a month for the next 100 years, and also to make my property more marketable, I would like to buy out my lease.
Right.
And they will sell that to you for, a couple $1,000, $2,000, $3,000, $5,000, $10,000 is usually what that buyout is. It's so accepted in the area, and the rents are so low that people don't usually buy out the lease, and they usually don't care about it. Lenders will lend on leasehold land, as opposed to fee simple land. If you own the deed and the deed is in your name, that is called fee simple. I have no idea. I even called my title attorney this morning to ask them why it's called fee simple, and they're like, I don't know, just But so obviously it's easy to understand why leasehold land is called leasehold land. Another place you see this, other title issues that could come up, is in Lancaster County. There's a lot of people who have sold the development rights to their farm, and those usually go for $1,000 to $3,000 to $5,000 an acre, depending on how good and high quality the soil is. So, if you've got a 100-acre farm that's worth several millions of dollars, you could put, $200,000 to $500,000 in your back pocket by selling the development rights, and then, continue to build onto your farm, build a new barn or things like that. The problem is that you've sold the development rights to a charitable trust that now holds them. And the whole reason that trust exists is to buy up development rights, so that people can't develop land in wherever. So if Josh Weidman said, I want to stop development from going on in Lancaster County.
Yeah.
But I don't have the money to buy a farm and then just decide to never develop it. And also, who knows what my stupid, rotten kids would do once I die and hand this down to them. You can write a $10,000 check to one of these farm preservation societies, and they go around buying development land and then just hold it forever and never actually sell it.
So it's interesting you say that, because there was a farm in Lancaster that sold at like a ridiculously low price a couple of years ago. It was like $300,000 for like 75 acres of land or something like that. And the issue that the farmer had is that when they were going to sell it, they were trying to get top dollar. And at the time, the market was really hot and developers would have loved to develop that land, but the development rights had already been sold. And so the value, instead of being a couple $1 million, was significantly less. So anyway, let's jump in.
Oh no,
here.
so Jeremy says something, the Amish do this a lot. Also, here's what I love about doing this show, and there's always something new to learn here. Mario says, what about if you went out and not properties that you owned, but bought other people's leasehold properties, you bought out the lease and then
Yeah.
you collected the dividends. That would be rather interesting to do. However, the spread is such that that's not a money making opportunity right now. But it is interesting to think about all the different ways that you can make money in real estate.
Yeah, it's a 0.01% return.
Right. Yeah. So it's not, and I think that they purposely do it that way so that number one, people never buy out the lease.
Sure.
And also so that other people don't buy out the lease and then, beat them at their own game. You also see this along riverbanks and things like that, where municipalities or, the railroads or PPL in Lancaster County owns a lot of riverbank land. And sometimes they own it just to control it. And sometimes they own it and will allow you to, do a long-term land lease on it. So you just have to know, what you're getting into. The reason this was interesting, it came up, was because somebody bought one of these leasehold properties, didn't know they were buying a leasehold property because they were buying from a wholesaler who obviously has no fiduciary responsibility to tell somebody that. However, and if there's no realtors involved, it might not come up. What really interested me about this situation was the title company involved did not bring it to their attention and tell them about it, which I thought was really odd because title companies usually know what's happening.
And you know what? Maybe it was mentioned. You know what I mean? It was probably one of the exemptions on the title policy. But I mean, let's face it. Really, if you're going to pay $1,000 to forego paying $8 a year or $10 a year, it doesn't make much sense.
Or $3,000 or $5,000 or $10,000 to forgo it. Like it just, and banks will lend on it as long as the term left in the lease is more that. So if you're getting a 30-year mortgage, there's got to be at least 30 years left to that lease. If you're getting a 15-year mortgage, there's got to be at least 15 years left in that lease. As long as the lease is longer than the term of the mortgage. Now, most banks or most bankers might not have ever heard of it before or might not have ever done one. And so you might need to push them. You might need to say, no, if you check your regs and talk to your boss's boss's boss. I'm sure this has come up before. And if you actually check all regs, it'll say all regs is for Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac type stuff. It says in there that they can lend on leasehold property.
Yeah. I mean, beyond that, if you in an area where this exists, it's not going to be no. You know what I mean?
It's common enough that all the other properties, are selling for the same thing around there. So therefore people know and understand what's going on.
All right. So let's get on to our main topic of the day.
Yes.
Easy ways to blow up your wholesale deal.
Well, do you mean destroy the wholesale deal, or do you mean like make it bigger and better than what it was before?
No, I
people
mean
use blow up two different ways.
You got the place under contract. You're ready to go to closing, and frankly, like think about it. I don't know about you, but I have had dozens of wholesale deals where like I'm mentally cashing the check. It's like, oh, we're ready.
Wholesale deals, mortgages, flips. I've done. I've been 100% commission sales for the last 20 years.
Well, exactly.
Not pre-cashing the check is something that I usually do a pretty good job of, but sometimes I fail at it.
Well, exactly. So there are things with wholesaling that are unique to wholesaling, and then there's other stuff that's just normal, everyday items that you see in every sales industry. We're going to take a look at a handful of them, see how to avoid them. Some of them you can, a lot of them you can avoid, some you can't. I mean, the first thing here is we have a loyal follower of our daily show that he's a newer wholesaler and fell into this trap on his first deal. And, he had a verbal agreement. It was through an agent and it was going to go to closing. And then all of a sudden, there was no agreement. Then all of a sudden, there was cold feet. And frankly, a lot of it had to do with a realization of what the property was really worth.
Right.
And so, anytime that you are entering into an agreement with somebody, get it in writing. Right. I mean, not just for the legal side of it, but it clarifies things with both parties. Like it's very easy to say, Judah, I'm going to give you $100,000 for this house. And Judah says, that sounds great. But Judah might be thinking, I'm going to walk away with 100 grand from this property. And I'm thinking, well, he's going to pay for my realtor fees. He's also going to, pay the transfer taxes. He's got to pay all the back liens. And at the end of the day, oh yeah, there's a mortgage on it. He's going to have to pay that too. I'm going to walk away. I'm going to pay 100 grand. He's going to get 20.
Right.
That's a big difference. And it's a big problem. If it's not there, it will blow up the deal.
Yeah. And it's important to remember that written agreements are still legal. Written agreements, it's a perfectly legal way of doing business. It's just not enforceable.
Oh, you said verbal agreements. You said
verbal. Yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah. Verbal agreements are 100% legal. They're just not enforceable.
That's
so right. I run into this all the time with my staff here. Somebody says, Judah, start managing my property. And I'm like, great, we're going to start managing the property. And then my staff gets mad that it takes me a week or two to actually get the contract signed or, hammer out the details of the contract. I'm like, guys, I've got a verbal agreement. Like, I'm okay to start managing this property. It's just that if they decided to keep the fee from me, they couldn't keep the fee. But before we even get there, we're going to, have this worked out, because usually we're not collecting fees until we collect rent, which is a month or two later. Time.
There we go. All right. So have a written agreement. That's the first thing. Second part, like the second big mistake is you don't verify all the signers. Now, I had a deal. This is several years ago. This is probably like 2010-ish. Had the contract signed, ready to go to closing. In fact, went to the closing table, and the title company looked down and they said, well, where's Mrs. So-and-so? And I'm going, Mrs. So-and-so, who's that? There were two people on the agreement on the as owners of the property. Here was a couple who had divorced. The husband lived in the property. They had never settled out that part of their agreement. So she still owned half of the property. She moved to another state, was remarried. I mean, we're talking like 15-year gap there.
Right.
And so, we ended up having to delay settlement, track down the seller. She was getting half of the money, and that created another problem with the guy who we'd been talking to, because he, just like I did, already spent
the money.
Exactly. So really quickly, when you go to the house, before you go in to negotiate and talk to the owner, make sure you know who legally owns it, right? Look at the public record. Make sure that everybody on the public record is signing the contract, including dead people. Now, I'm not going to raise them from the dead, but, if it was, I don't know, Tom and Susie Jenkins, and Tom was passed away, it would be Susie Jenkins and the estate of Tom Jenkins, right? And so, Susie might be the administrator. She might have inherited everything. You might want to put sole heir to the estate of or something like that, but you got to have it listed there, and it's got to be signed in that manner. I usually type up my contracts before I go into a house. It allows me to walk in there and I'm like, well, I have the contract right here. You're telling me, you're telling me your name's Judah, and the guy who owns the house is Joe.
Right.
Who are you?
Right.
Joe. Sounds pretty simple, but it's a big one.
Yeah, exactly. And you do want to look for exact matches. And usually, if you've ever worked with title companies, they'll sometimes, call you up and say, hey, Josh Weidman, this guy used to live in Philadelphia. Josh Weidman, is he married to so-and-so? Josh, is it Josh A. Weidman or Josh D. Weidman?
Dude, that's a very funny, it's funny you brought that up. Did a wholesale deal one time on a listed property. Okay. The seller of the listed property comes to closing with his ID, valid ID. He didn't own the property. It was an abandoned house that he moved into. He had the same name as the seller, or as the legal owner, who had died years before. And ended up a situation where it was a title claim, but the only difference was the middle initial, and the title company missed it. I mean, nobody knew. Like actually the listing agent was a friend of mine, and he was bamboozled by it too. It's a crazy situation.
That's crazy. Yeah. So that's why you check and double check and triple check, because when this stuff comes up, it ruins everybody's day, week, and month.
That's exactly right. All right. Don't have a signer. Judah, I'm sure this never happened to you. The tenant won't open the door.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So you got a willing seller. You probably have a handful of buyers that want to come and see this property. There's a tenant in the place, and they
Right.
told you they're going to move out at the end of the month, just before the settlement. Fingers crossed, right? So you go there, you call them, or the owner calls them, schedules an appointment at the house. You go out there and you're knocking on the door. You're there on the right time, right day, everything, and they won't open the door. What do you
Right.
do?
Yeah, it's a rough situation to be in, and typically it's why I try to set this up ahead of time. And I tell tenants on a very regular basis, "Hey, listen, Sally or Bob or Frank or whatever, I want to be as non-intrusive as possible. It's going to be me or one of my partners or somebody else showing the property. I just need your cooperation for like a week or two
Yeah.
weeks to make this happen. We're never going to be showing the property, after 6 or 7 o'clock at night. I don't usually do a lot of Sunday showings. If we do a Saturday showing, it's going to be first thing in the morning or like first thing in the afternoon. We're not going to be doing a lot of those things. I'm not going to have an open house here." Or you spin it the other way and you say, "I'm going to do an open house and just try and do, like 1 or 2 open houses and get a bunch of people in, get a bunch of people through." And go from there. But I really try to communicate clearly with the tenant right up front. What's the best cell phone number for you? So I can text you. Listen, you and I both know that the lease says I can, come within 24 hours. I've already had trouble with tenants, and I've had to remind tenants. Listen, the reason I'm involved as a wholesaler here, or the reason I'm involved as a listing agent, is because the owner wants to sell the property.
Right.
The owner would like to sell the property with you still in it as a tenant,
Well,
but the owner wants to sell the property.
a
And
lot of
typically people can connect those dots on their own.
a lot of times though, what you end up with is you already have a conflict between the owner and the tenant, right?
Right.
Like that's not an uncommon situation.
Right.
In that situation, the best thing to do is get the tenant on your side. And you
Right.
say, "Hey, listen, we're going to be purchasing this property. Whether you are staying in the house or not staying in the house, whether you're leaving at the end of this month or you decide to ride it out. But if we buy it and you're still here, we're going to evict."
Right.
And like, you don't want that. I don't want that. Give them the carrot and the stick. The
Right.
eviction stick, but you go back and you say, "Look, I know you feel like you're being taken advantage of. I know you feel like you're being forced out. That's why I'm going to make sure you get your security deposit back. And number two, I'm going to give you $1,000 when you move out of the place."
Right. Yep.
And you give them incentives on both sides to make sure that it works for everybody. Then, you cross your fingers and hope.
Yeah, and maybe there's not enough. In it to give them cash or do cash for keys, like Mario was talking about over here in the comments. Which, by the way, we love the running commentary during the show, guys. We always get about 15, 20, 30 comments during the show. We really appreciate that from our listeners. I think this is another time where, as I've talked about before, Starbucks gift cards or Dunkin' Donuts gift cards. Just giving somebody a $25 gift card to Ruby Tuesdays or whatever restaurant wants to sponsor our show. If there's a restaurant out there and you'd like us to, this is another one of those sponsorship opportunities that you can insert your restaurant name here. But so,
Right.
give them a $25 gift card. "Hey, Josh, listen, I'm going to be doing showings over the next 2 weeks. Here's a $25 gift card just because I know I'm making your life a little bit difficult. If you could just do me a favor and let me in." I've had tenants who were like, "Hey, listen, I observe the Sabbath, so please don't do anything Friday night at midnight through Saturday at midnight." And whether they're Black Hebrews, whether they're of Jewish descent, whether they are Seventh-day Adventists. Like, there's a number of different religious sects out there that really observe the Sabbath. Now, listen, I like Sundays, and I don't like to do a lot of work on Sundays, but like if somebody follows the Sabbath, it's serious to them.
Yeah.
And just because the lease says you can come in on a Sunday doesn't mean you should push your luck or on a Friday through Saturday during the Sabbath hours doesn't mean you should push those things.
Well, and at the end of the day, it just comes down to being a human. You're like,
Yeah.
the tenant might be, difficult to deal with, but that doesn't come out in out of nowhere.
Thanks, Johnny. We do this every show, every day at noon, and we try to always be bringing up good, relevant content for what's going on.
That's right. All right. Next one on the list: liens on the property. This is the most frustrating part, and it's one of those reasons why you ought to be targeting properties with that aren't like the lowest of the low properties.
Right.
The $10,000 property looks awesome.
Yeah.
It
Warzone properties are tough to do.
What's that? Yeah.
Warzone properties are tough to do.
They're really tough. They're really tough because number one, they don't have a lot of value, but number two, even without that value, they probably have a lot of liens. I find the best way to overcome this kind of stuff is look up if there's back taxes on the public record. Go in, do a little research. A lot of times, local municipalities, you may have the ability to check water records based on a water account number, which coincidentally you can often find still laying around the property. But it gives you a little bit of background where, hey, you go into and you're talking to the owner, and this is going to come with the next one. The last one on our list, coincidentally, is talk to the owner about what these liens are going to mean beforehand. Usually when I'm making an offer on a property, I'm going to give them a net number. Make it simple. I'm going to give you $100,000 for this property, Judah. I'm going to pay for your closing costs, which include your transfer taxes and recording fees and all that kind of stuff. There's not going to be any realtor fees on my end. I'm, cash buyer, all this stuff. But I can't tell you if there are any back taxes on the property right now. I can't tell you if you haven't paid your gas bill in 5 years. I can't tell you if the water's been running nonstop, for the last 3 years. I don't know what those numbers are. They're going to come out of that $100,000. If you have a judgment against you, or, and you go through the litany, but you can overcome a lot of those problems by having a discussion with the seller right up front.
Right. Another thing to talk about and ask always is has the municipality, this is one of the things that comes up a lot in central Pennsylvania. If you're doing a lot of deals, you'll get like, this will come up, once or twice a year, maybe. Hey, has this municipality said that they are putting in public sewer and therefore they're going to reassess everybody $10,000? Because if you've gotten that bill in your hand, it is due and you must pay it, even if it's due, down the road or something like that. It's a negotiable item between buyer and seller. It might not show up on public records yet or anything like that. But if you know about it, you as the seller, you must disclose it. If not, the title company can come back and make you pay it after the fact. So it's always good to ask, hey, listen, just curious. Have they said they're putting in street lights? Have they said they're doing sidewalks here? Have they said they're doing anything like that you want to talk about? Are they building an incinerator? It might even be like a property in the middle of nowhere. And so, maybe they've already got, or they're obviously not going to do public sewer, water, or sidewalks or anything like that. But hey, maybe they're doing a public incinerator for trash, and they're just going to assess everybody who lives in the township a $3,000 one-time fee. So you need to ask all of those questions, because and here's the other thing that you need to do, and I think this ties into our last point as well. As soon as you get that property under agreement, order title. Don't wait until you have it under agreement with a seller. If you cancel title, your title company might say, hey, Judah, listen, you canceled title. I want $100 for that. Okay, great. Here's $100. There might be a small cancellation fee.
It might be 300. It might be 300.
And if you do a bunch of business with the title company, if you're doing 2 or 3 deals a year, even if you're canceling 5 or 6 deals a year, they won't care. But until they kind of see where your track record is, the first 2 or 3 times you have to cancel title, they might have a problem with that. Anyway, last point, Josh.
All right. Actually, I'm sorry. 2 more. Poor communication. All right. Oftentimes, this comes from the wholesaler, and it comes from the wholesaler almost all the time because of lack of experience. And most of the time, it's an uncomfortable feeling where here's what I see a lot from wholesalers, usually beginners. Okay. They go into a house, they go through their presentation, they get to the point where they're really excited because it looks like they're going to get a contract, and they speed through the contract in the process. So they convince the seller to sell at a number, and then they get the contract and they're out the door and they just can't wait. And then they're dealing with a buyer, and the buyer is like, yeah, I'll take the place at your number. And they forget to talk to the buyer about some key items. And so what you end up with is you have two parties that are essential to the closing that are out of whack on the communication side. So the process, like, all right, Mr. Seller, here's how this is going to go. I'm going to put the place, we have a contract here. Next, I'm going to order title on the property. And you have to explain that, because most of the time, well, shoot, what's the average person does not own more than, they own less than 5 properties in their entire life. So they don't do this every day.
Not just today, in their entire life, they're going to own less than 5 properties.
So you got to explain what each part of the process. We get title work. It's a background check on the house. I just have to see if there's any liens or encumbrances on the property that need to be paid off before closing. Here, and then you go into that kind of stuff. Then you go into the expenses. If you are setting it up so they're paying transfer taxes and liens and back tax, all that kind of stuff, communicate it. Let them know. Here's what your likely proceeds are going to be. And price. That goes into the expense as well. But this is all often
letting them know this is $100,000, but it's going to be $100,000 minus, whatever first, second, or third lien mortgages you have. If you have 2 years of unpaid taxes, or even just this year of unpaid taxes,
right?
All of those things. Yeah,
and this can be done really easily by you just say, Judah, I'm going to pay $100,000 for this house.
Right.
I'm going to pay my transfer taxes and your transfer taxes. I don't know what else is on the property. If there's other stuff on the property that have to be paid before it's given to me, you're going to be responsible for it. It's going to come out of your $100,000.
We could spend a whole half an hour just on the just on how to communicate and what to communicate.
That's exactly right.
Just make sure that you communicate as much as possible. And it's okay if your first deal, you screw it up because of communication, and it falls apart because of communication. You're then going to learn what to do the next time. This is why you need to have a pipeline of deals coming to you. So
That's
you
right.
can screw it up the first 2 or 3 times.
Exactly. When you're dealing with the buyer, you got to know how they're financing the deal. You got to know what their timeline is and when they're going to have you a deposit, because a contract without a deposit from a buyer is not a contract. All right. You got to make sure that their timeline lines up with yours. Third part of that is the seller. Like, find out what they're going to be using the money for. Because if you find a lien on the property that has to be paid and it significantly diminishes their takeaway, they're probably not going to close. You have to address it with them. You got to make sure that they understand the price and the terms of when they're going to get paid, not just that they're going to get paid.
Mario, you're asking a great question here. What about disclosure laws for a wholesaler? And listen, Josh and I are planning a big, long curriculum on this. We're going to do some serious, in-depth training on wholesale and some other things like that we just can't get into in our 30-minute daily show right now.
That's right.
We've got that question that's going to be answered.
That's a good one though, Mario. All right. So cold feet. This is the one that you can't do anything about, except, try to hold their feet to the fire. Cold feet, warm them up, right? A lot of it's out of your control. You need to get to the root of the problem. Why do they have cold feet? If you get to the point where you're talking legal, you don't want to do this. One time I had a contract that we pursued legally. It cost me $10,000 to get a $2,500 out of court settlement. Not worth it. But the motivation of that backing out of the contract matters a lot. Right. You can overcome a lot of this stuff by, having everything laid out, having your process in hand, and clearly communicating that with your seller.
Right.
Here's what you're going to get. And,
you also have to anchor. So and we'll just wrap up with this. People make emotional decisions and people buy for emotional reasons. So if somebody buys from you because you were able to tug their heartstrings or point out their fears or do things like that, and you were able to get them to buy from you, whatever. So what they're buying in this case is selling you the property at a low price. You then have to come behind those emotional reasons and back it up with logical reasons, because buyer's remorse is a thing. It happens all the time. When you buy that pair of jeans at the mall, you get home, you're like, should have I really spent this much? When you go out to eat, buyer's remorse is a very real psychological phenomenon, and it happens all the time. What's going to make them not have cold feet is knowing the facts behind the emotion. So we give people facts by letting them know, but with leave behinds of who we are, with explaining the process concisely, with other things like that. But if you just trade on emotion, you are going to have a bunch of deals fall apart. You might have a higher close ratio if you just do emotion than if you do facts and emotion, but you will have deals fall apart because of it.
That's right. All right. So Mario brought up an excellent question earlier. We had a little bit of a snafu with our website yesterday, so we're going to talk about this one more time. We're going to be doing a 5-day Facebook challenge that we're calling Flipping Houses Without Cash, Credit, or Criminal Behavior. That's going to be starting on November 2nd. We're going to be doing it on a private Facebook page. And, essentially, Judah and I, for the last several months, we've been talking about the real estate market. Every Friday, we go through and we look at the numbers and we see what things are. And, until about a month ago, I was pretty pessimistic about where things were, and then Judah kind of like reached through the screen and smacked me around a little bit. He said, take a look at where the market really is. And what I did was I went back and looked at when I started in real estate. Some of my very best months came at a market that looked very much like it does today, and wholesaling deals, flipping properties. And so, I think this is a really phenomenal time to be a wholesaler because, number one, think about it. All of the listings, all of the nice listings that hit the market, there's 5 or 10 people lined up outside ready to see the house. You have multiple listings same day. We've got ridiculously low inventory, low mortgage rates. And there are a ton of sellers that still need an all cash offer. Believe it or not, like you wouldn't believe it by the stuff that's on the MLS right now. But we talked to Eric Brewer. I know from my own marketing, the stuff that's coming back, there are a ton of people that would prefer the convenience of an all cash offer over a higher price on the MLS. So, we're going to be holding a 5-day training, 5-day Facebook challenge. And, to sign up, it's free. There's no cost here. You go to buildandgrowwithrealestate.com and, put in your name and email address, and we're going to get started on November 2nd.
Yeah, buildandgrowwithrealestate.com. Get registered. It's a free thing. We're doing this just so that we're going a little bit long here today, but we want to do a Facebook challenge because it allows us to do a number of different things that we can't do here on the show. For our regular listeners, we try to keep the show to half an hour. What we're doing on the website, and thank you, Matt, for telling us that the website is working today. We apologize that it was down yesterday.
Perfect.
What we're looking to do is we can go a little bit longer than half an hour, and we also will have greater replay abilities, and there's a number of different things like that. We're also just going to be focused on flipping houses without cash, credit, or criminal behavior. We're just going to be focusing on that market segment and how to do deals like that in this 5-day Facebook challenge. So my suggestion is that you sign up, that you recommend other people sign up, and you get people to this event because it is going to be some really great can't miss activity. Yeah, Troy, we began the show talking about the Fry Trust for about 10 or 15 minutes. And so go ahead and watch that on replay, and would love your take on that as well, my friend.
That's right. Hey, thanks for joining us today. If you like the show, don't forget to like and share. Join us on our Facebook page, facebook.com/build and grow with real estate. We'll be back here again tomorrow with a lot of good stuff. All right. See you, Judah. Have a good one, man.
See you, everybody.